Ocean Falls was once a thriving town. Located on the remote and rugged central coast of British Columbia, it was a true company town, built around a pulp and paper company, but also a real town, with a theater and a swimming pool, a hospital, and annual town celebrations.
I wonder if this is like the breakfast room.
Today, the town is a shadow of its former self, most of it completely absorbed by the forest, the remaining buildings falling piece by piece into the earth, save for a few bright spots where a very small group of residents are making a go of it in this fascinating place. Join us as we explore Ocean Falls, both the history and the present-day reality, as we try to make sense of what happened here and what's going to happen next. Hello and welcome to Ocean Falls. We got in here yesterday, we sailed in, and if you are visiting Ocean Falls, that is how you'll be arriving, by boat. There are no roads. We arrived in the bright sunlight, which was a really nice way to see the town, and also I think a bit of an unusual way, because this is apparently the most rainy inhabited place in all of North America. It rains for about 200 days of the year. Today, we are back to Ocean Falls special weather, and it is pouring down. I've been trying to succinctly explain what Ocean Falls is, and the closest I've been able to come is that it's an inhabited ghost town. To simply call it a ghost town isn't right, because people live here and there are ongoing things happening in the town today. But you also can't ignore the fact that this town is completely different from what it once was. The vast majority of this town either no longer exists or is crumbling beyond a state of repair. And the story of how this town came to be a ghost town and the people who inhabit it now is a really, really fascinating story. And beyond just kind of the obvious appeal of looking at some abandoned buildings, I think that the story of how such a big and thriving town just stopped thriving is really interesting. And so we're going to try to dive into it. I first heard of Ocean Falls in a strange way. It was several years ago, and we were in the midst of rebuilding our boat. I was really struggling with motivation, to say the least. And so to try and inspire myself, I started researching places on the BC coast that we could one day sail to. And I came across this music video of a bluegrass band called Under the Rocks performing a song called Ocean Falls, filmed in some crumbling buildings.
Take me back to good old Ocean Falls.
The band was great, the song was great, and the town seemed super interesting, so I started doing more research and asking people if they had ever heard of this place. Turns out, I actually have a surprising amount of personal connections to Ocean Falls, which I'll get to later. First, let's go have a walk around town and see what this place is all about. So we're standing right on the corner of town now, as it were. The harbor is just over there, and the big hotel is just over there. And behind me, this was all housing. There were buildings stretched all the way up the hill, but now the trees have totally overtaken. We found a map online that actually shows Ocean Falls circa 1953. I'm standing here, and the building behind me is the Kimsquit Lodge, but all other buildings that were here no longer exist. An interesting part of this town is that although there are some paved roads, a lot of the roads here were actually built out of wood. They were like wooden boardwalks. And so given the amount of rain that this town gets, you can imagine what would happen to a wooden road if not maintained. They no longer exist. But it's not all stories from the past. There's some present-day activity in this town as well. There are about 40 year-round residents making a go of it in this town. The Ocean Falls gift shop is a charming little place that is maintained by some of those residents. And the first day we arrived, I was surprised to find a post office. I even sent some postcards to my friends and family. The marina is also obviously maintained. The docks are in really good shape. There's electricity and water, and there's a harbor master who comes around to collect a very modest fee. But fairly quickly, the other side of this town looms overhead. Oh, you know what? There was a bakery here.
Yeah.
So this is the Martin Hotel. This was built in the 1940s, and a large part of the reason it was built was to house temporary mill workers, but I'm sure some folks came here on vacation as well, and it was made to be really beautiful. Oh yeah. Big commercial kitchen. That's creepy. Ocean Falls was truly a company town. It started because of a pulp and paper mill. They realized that there's this big lake behind at a slight elevation, which first of all means fresh water supply, obviously both for the town and for the mill. But second of all, the elevation meant that they could build this massive hydroelectric dam to provide all the power that they would need, again, for both the town and the mill. But what was really interesting about this particular site is there was a man named Archie Martin who was kind of the impetus behind creating a real company town. And this is what's so interesting about Ocean Falls, because I mean, there's tons of logging camps and mining camps, resource-based temporary residential zones all along the BC coast. But Ocean Falls was created with the vision to really build a community. And so there was a huge amount of effort put into entertainment infrastructure and infrastructure that made people's lives pleasant. This very hotel actually housed a bowling alley. And because of that, people who grew up in this town have really positive memories of growing up here. But underneath all of that really positive stuff, it was still a company town, and it revolved kind of around this one single industry, which was the pulp and paper mill. And I think you can see very clearly now where this is going. This was the Blue Room, and I believe that this was sort of like the fancy ballroom. It's got the windows overlooking the water, these beautiful blue ceilings. I mean, this would have been a really, really stunning place. Some locals pulled up as we were exploring, and we heard them, coming into the hotel, and I wasn't really sure. I was like, are we about to get in trouble? There's no signs saying keep out or anything. The doors are wide open. But sure enough, they were super, super friendly, as everyone we've met here has been. And they were just here to poke around as well. Obviously a building decaying like this changes continuously as things continue to decay. So I think they were just checking in on it. Apparently they don't live here full time, but they come in the summers because they like to fish. And I mean, it's good fishing around here, absolutely. And definitely the cheapest waterfront real estate you can get in Canada. Actually, I'll say in BC. I don't know about the East Coast, but in BC for sure. One of the videos I watched on YouTube about Ocean Falls before coming here actually pointed out that cloth hanging up in that top corner window. And that video was about 5 years ago, so it's still there. This was actually the Hudson's Bay Company, which is kind of one of those super iconic old Canadian stores, which actually just recently has gone bankrupt. But the Hudson's Bay Company was around for a really long time, and there was one in Ocean Falls as well. Once upon a time, there was a lot of life happening on these streets and in these buildings, and apparently that life was a pretty good one. Ocean Falls was, by all accounts, a really lovely place to live. There were these really nice homes. There was an elementary school and a high school, and so families were raised here. People really built their lives here as they would in any other town. But come the 70s, the mill business was struggling a bit. I mean, first of all, the town had been built several decades earlier, so infrastructure was starting to need upgrading and repair, which is obviously expensive. The cost of labor was increasing, and the fact of how remote this town is, it is so far away from any other major city, was all sort of eating into the profits until eventually the corporation realized that they couldn't turn a profit anymore. But because the mill owned the town, the mill shutting down kind of meant that the town shut down. And so there was a massive exodus at that point. Now that wasn't fully the closure of the town quite yet. That comes next. Check out this wallpaper. This is such a sweet little house. I mean, I think it's beyond the point of really being able to repair it, but I mean, this big front living room with these wraparound windows, you can see the water. In here, there's just like such a sweet little staircase with a really nice banister. Oh my God, look at this little nook for kids to play. Oh my God, this is adorable. Wait, come look at this. There's like a little, it's either a figurine or it's a stuffed hummingbird up there, which is kind of interesting. When Crown Zellerbach gave up the mill, the BC provincial government stepped in and actually purchased the town from Crown Zellerbach to try and keep it running. I don't know exactly what their goal was, maybe just to keep the coast vital and keep people living here. But it didn't go so well, and it only took them 7 years before the government decided to close down the town entirely in 1980. They actually came in with bulldozers and excavators, and they just started knocking down buildings. Left, right, and center. Now, some of the buildings were privately owned, and so they couldn't knock those ones down. And so I think those are the majority of the buildings still standing. And for whatever reason, they left the big hotel. Maybe it was just too big to demolish. I have no idea. But they demolished most of the mill. They demolished most of the houses. And what's left is just a really small portion of what Ocean Falls once was. So the BC government had given up on the town, buildings had been bulldozed, the vast majority of the population had been completely uprooted from their lives and left. But the folks we just met in the hotel just now said that at that point there was also kind of an interesting period in the town's history where, according, using his words, hippies just came and lived in a bunch of the buildings, lived in the hotel. And I really wonder what that period would have looked like for the town, because things would have still been relatively fresh and everything relatively functional. But I have to imagine it was like a little bit of a free-for-all until things kind of settled and a new status quo was built up. And a little hint of that new status quo you can see behind me. There is this beautiful greenhouse, there's this really well-kept house, and there's pieces of that all throughout Ocean Falls. There's this really odd juxtaposition. Over there we saw yesterday this lovely playground with a cute little sign in front of it, and then behind the playground, just this absolutely shattered pile of rubbish that was once a building. And I think that is really emblematic of what Ocean Falls is today. There is a lot of care and community spirit and really lovely people who live here and are trying to make a go of it in some very odd surroundings. But with that also comes this massive opportunity. The more time I spend here, the more I really understand why people want to live here today. Because just imagine the opportunity to create a town and build it up the way you want it. And that's certainly not without struggles, obviously. I think it's pretty tough going, but a very, very unique set of circumstances, to be sure. Not something you can find in a lot of places. Down here somewhere, according to the 1953 era map that we found, would have been the indoor swimming pool. And Ocean Falls had an incredible indoor swimming pool and a really incredible swim team. They had a great head coach and they were really well represented in the Olympics. They produced some incredible swimmers. And I think that's another story of how successful this was as a town, not just as a place people flew in and out of to work. The photos that I've seen of this place, the historical photos, I think I remember seeing a few from sort of this angle, looking down to the water with the Grand Martin Hotel on one side and people all dressed impeccably, so impeccably, in every photo I've seen. And yeah, this is what it looks like today. Next to the remains, the crumbling remains of the Martin Hotel, is actually a present-day guest house. What's it called? I think the Old Bank Inn. You can stay here. You can come, you can visit. We met the proprietor, or at least someone who works there. I'm not sure his exact title last night. And he said he had to go feed his guests, so I suppose they do dinner as well. It's a nicely kept building, and the location is kind of interesting, right next to the less nicely kept Martin Hotel. Behind me is the site of, I think, one of the most interesting present-day developments in Ocean Falls, which is a Bitcoin mining operation. I don't understand enough about all of this technology to really understand what they do, other than the fact that it's related to crypto and it requires a great deal of power to run. But that is actually the one thing that Ocean Falls can certainly provide. The hydroelectric dam that was built in the 1920s is still just chugging along. and it now provides a surplus of power for this town. So it's a perfect opportunity for a company like this that needs a lot of power. So that's one interesting modern day thing going on. And if we just look over here, this is a BC Ferries dock, which is also really interesting. So the ferry comes, certainly not very frequently. I had a look at the schedule and it was a bit confusing, but it seems like it arrives every 2 weeks or so. So yeah, that's the BC Ferries dock. I mean, in a way, it's actually incredibly impressive. They have a ferry service. There's a lot of Gulf islands down south with a greater population than this that don't have a ferry. So right on Ocean Falls.
Back to good old Ocean Falls is where I wanna be. All my childhood memories from the town down by the sea. Oh, the town down by the sea. At the head of Cousins Inlet, nestled there upon the hill. The town where I was born and raised, run by Pacific Mill. Run by Pacific Mill. We rarely saw the sun, I tell, it was awfully wet and cold. Folks of Ocean Falls were known as the Rain People. We were the Rain People. Good old Ocean Falls. Good old Ocean Falls. Oh, if I could see it now, spend a day in my hometown, take me back to good old Ocean Falls.
So this tune that I'm trying to hash my way through here is the Ocean Falls song by Under the Rocks, which is a local BC band. This is the song that sort of first introduced me to Ocean Falls. And it was sort of this instant fascination for me. I guess it was just really interesting that I had never heard of this place before because it seemed like it had been such a big town. And so I started asking people about it, and I was actually pretty surprised. My mom said that I actually have a pretty strong personal connection to Ocean Falls that perhaps somewhere in my childhood brain I knew about, but it totally had escaped me. My sailing mentor when I was a teenager, he was actually initially my swim coach, but he was the only person I knew with a sailboat. And I was really intensely interested in sailing as a teenager, and so I asked if he would teach me how, and he did. He's initially from Hungary, but he came to Canada and actually spent a long time at Ocean Falls. And while he was here, he built a sailboat just in the woods, sort of around from town. It was like boat only access to get out to where he built it. He sort of built a little structure, built a boat. And then after that, I think he spent about 20 years living on that boat all up and down this BC coast. So just for context, I grew up nowhere near this town. I grew up on the Sunshine Coast, which is down south. It's pretty close to Vancouver. In order to get to Ocean Falls from where I grew up, you would first have to take a ferry to Vancouver, and then you would have to drive about 16 hours to Bella Coola. And then from Bella Coola, you have to take a ferry, which runs once every 1.5 weeks-ish, somewhere around there. So all that to say, it's not close, not at all. But what has really surprised me is, I have a personal Instagram account that's just for friends and family. And so I posted a bit about us being here on that account. And the amount of responses I got from people I know personally in my life who have some kind of connection to Ocean Falls, I was actually quite surprised. A guy that I grew up with playing the fiddle, he reached out and said that his dad grew up here. Another friend that I went to high school with said that her grandparents lived here and absolutely loved it. My mom just messaged me and said that a family friend used to work on the dam here, which I had no idea about. So it's a small community, and although its population peaked at I think about 3,500, which doesn't sound like a lot, if you take into account the decades that this was a thriving town and the amount of lives that it touched, and that, you know, all of those people, when the town shut down, had to disperse to different areas, mostly of British Columbia. It's really fascinating. You know, this town's legacy really stretches still in present day. And I have a feeling that we're probably going to get a few folks watching this video who were searching for Ocean Falls because of the memories that they have of this place. It struck me as we walked around that we're documenting a moment in time that is fleeting. These buildings are crumbling, and probably in the not too distant future, they will no longer be standing. This is Ocean Falls in 2025, a snapshot of a place that is constantly changing. I have no idea what the future holds for Ocean Falls, but despite being supposedly abandoned for over 40 years, it has a magnetism that has never fully allowed it to become a ghost town. It is simultaneously decaying and growing, as some buildings crumble and others are restored. It's located on a remote and stunning part of the coast, nestled at the head of an inlet between saltwater and fresh, where a dam from the 1920s powers technology from the 2020s. It's a place of contrasts and contradictions. It's a place that brings up a lot of existential questions about what a town is. And perhaps most importantly for present day, it's a town that has an incredibly strong legacy of people scattered all over this province and this country whose lives have been touched by Ocean Falls. I will put a link to some of the resources I used for this video in the video description, including the very useful 1953 map of the town and a link to the City of Vancouver photo archives, which was an incredible resource. If you're interested in knowing more about the history of Ocean Falls, I'd really suggest searching their archives and looking through the photos. They have literally hundreds of historic photos from the mill and the town and just daily life in the town. It was really interesting to scroll through them all. And yeah, I've included a few of them in this video, but there's a lot more on the archive site itself. A huge thank you for being here, for watching the video. We feel really lucky to have finally made it up to Ocean Falls. It's been several years that this place has fascinated me. I think just the juxtaposition between the old town, the crumbling ghost town vibes of the place, combined with such modern technology, like the Bitcoin mining that's happening here. It's such a unique place. I don't think I've ever visited anything quite like it, and it was a really fascinating spot. So thanks for being here, thanks for watching. Extra big thank you to the folks whose names are now appearing on screen for always going above and beyond to make sure that Magic Carpet keeps being produced. We are a fully audience-funded channel, and that really means a lot to us. We are so grateful that we are able to make these videos week after week and share them with you guys. It's a real privilege and an honor, and it brings me a great deal of joy. So thank you. If you would like to become a patron and help support the channel, you can do so for as little as $2 a month. It's entirely up to you how you would like to donate, and we are truly appreciative of that. We post real-time, behind-the-scenes updates on Patreon, which are never published anywhere else, so if you're interested in gaining access to those, they're all there. All right, as always, we will see you next week. Huge thank you for being here, everyone. Bye for now.